Welcome, welcome. Thank you everyone for joining. My name is MarcAnthony Bonanno. I am an attorney at Presiding Law. I am the chair of the Education and Training Committee for Africa in the Moot. For those of you who do not know, Africa in the Moot is a nonprofit organization based primarily out of Nairobi, Kenya. We are an organization entirely dedicated to increasing African universities' representation and involvement in the Willem C. Vis International Commercial Arbitration Competition that takes place both in Vienna and Hong Kong every year. We are also aimed at increasing the involvement of African practitioners and African students in the international arbitration and international dispute resolution space. We are thrilled to welcome you today to another open access education series program. This time we are very excited to welcome Dr. Professor Patricia Shaughnessy from Stockholm University. By way of a little bit of background that we will be jumping into very shortly, Professor Shaughnessy is a professor at Stockholm University, where she has been for nearly 30 years, over 30 years, focusing on international procedure and commercial law with specialization in arbitration. Prior to her life in academia, she was a civil litigator practicing in the United States in Hawaii. She was also a U.S. Supreme Court fellow. She has been a member of the ICC Court and ICC Commission and part of the board of the SCC Arbitration Institute. She serves as an arbitrator and is also most relevant to our students and to our organization. Among her unbelievable qualifications, the president of the Willem C. Vis Arbitration Moot organization. So without further ado, I'll turn it to you, Professor Shaughnessy. Like I said, we are thrilled to have you here. We are very excited to engage in a really fun conversation today. I think from the American involved in, one of the few Americans involved at the heart of Africa in the Moot, I have to ask you, your undergraduate degrees, you were speech and communication at the University of Hawaii. You practiced for 10 years in Hawaii. What's the connection to Hawaii? I'm very jealous as sitting in New York and it's currently 30 degrees Fahrenheit outside, so it's very cold. So why Hawaii? And then also more importantly, why speech and communication? What was that interest when you were first going into university?
Well, I'm not sure I will answer your question in the same order, but I can note, starting with, don't be too envious right now. Up in these high northern latitudes right now, it gets pitch black by 4 p.m. And it's another month till we have the shortest day of the year, then another month after that till we get to back where we are today. And it's also about 30 degrees. It'll get slippery and icy tonight, and tomorrow morning it will be, wet and icy. So don't feel too envious. But it is a great place to study, because what else would you want to be doing when it's pitch black at this time of day? So, there's one advantage to moving to Sweden from Hawaii. Not only that it's a 12-hour time difference, a 24-hour flying adventure, but it is so very different that it's very hard to make comparisons, because when you start making comparisons, you're an expat, oftentimes you really long to go home. Yeah. And so it's better to be in a situation where it's two very different things. So I did it the proverbial way. I took maybe not proverbial, but I took a ski vacation to Switzerland, my first ski vacation to Europe. A bit over 30 years ago. And I'd been practicing law for 10 years as a litigator, and I was in my young 30s, and I had never been married and happy with my career. And on the train station between Zurich Airport and the ski resort, I met my now husband, and he was 5 years older than me, and he had never been married, and he was doing mostly large publicly traded M&A. He was a partner at Linkletters for many years, and he couldn't imagine moving to an island out in the Pacific where there were sandy beaches that got in the way of reading your newspaper on the beach, and the trade winds. So I made the move to Sweden, and I'm not complaining. I've had a great life here.
Yeah, it's absolutely amazing. I think one of the things that I'm curious to hear from you is, so you practice as a litigator for 10 years before really transitioning into the international space. And so what was that like for you in the litigation world? How did you like it? Were there things you didn't like? Um,
Well, I guess I had a good beginning to moving into international arbitration. The law firm I worked with in Hawaii at that time was Fong, Miho, Okano, and Wong. And I was the only person in the law firm, including from messengers up to the senior partners, all had Asian backgrounds, Asian ancestry of different types. So I was the token haole, as we say, and that means foreigner, white person, as we say in Hawaii, and also the only woman lawyer. So that put me in a unique position, and it was also a bit challenging more than 30 years ago for all you young women out there, because particularly a lot of Asian clients had a really difficult time relying upon a young woman lawyer. So when we would be in meetings, they would always be looking to the partners, the male partners of Asian descent, to be confirming if anything I contributed was correct. And so you really had to work hard to develop their trust and their reliance upon your abilities to be able to give them adequate and good advice. So that was interesting, and I enjoyed being in a cross-cultural environment. So as I said, that was a good beginning for international arbitration.
for you as a young female lawyer, were there other female lawyers perhaps outside your firm that you looked up to, for whether as a mentor relationship or just as a role model holistically, that was sort of, for lack of a better term, your North Star as you transitioned and progressed through your career?
Um, not really. When I was in law school, then I had a couple. I went to law school in Washington State, and I worked in the Attorney General's office for most of law school. And so there was a really talented woman litigator in the office that had the opportunity to work with. But when I returned to Hawaii, there were not so many. And then after I clerked for a judge, I was very into doing sporting activities. So I was very interested in competitive outrigger canoe racing, long and short distances. And I got very into doing triathlons. And so if you're into doing triathlons, where do you go? You go to the Big Island, Kona, home of the original Ironman. And so I moved there and worked in a general commercial firm. So we were like 5 or 6, 7 lawyers. So I did that for 5 years before returning to Honolulu for other professional opportunities. So practicing on the Big Island in Hawaii, there really were no other women practicing.
Yeah, yeah, that must have been very challenging to say the least. But it sounds like it still was an unbelievable experience for you. It also is very interesting that you were in a firm that seemed like from the get-go that you were in this cross-border international collaboration experience very early on in your career. And I think that sort of is interesting to me, because was that the first spark of interest in international law and comparative law and what you studied and what you teach now?
Um, yeah, I suppose so. It was, because you had, particularly when we had clients, for example, we had many clients from Japan and from other areas in Asia and a Broadway. And they found American litigation pretty annoying, it was a bit contentious, time consuming, expensive. The discovery of documents was invasive, the pretrial hearings. And so at that time, and so we had a very active representative of the American Arbitration Association in Hawaii. So back in the mid 80s, then I became certified as an arbitrator in the court annexed arbitration mediation program. So Hawaii was actually pretty early with that. And then we started offering clients opportunities, particularly Asian clients, to enter into arbitration agreements in their contracts. And so I became quite interested in that, but it was really nascent. It was just beginning then. So when I came to Sweden, it became natural for me to use the opportunity to do some serious study, academic study of arbitration. And so that was a segue. Certainly as an American litigator who didn't know Swedish law and didn't speak Swedish, I was not going to be very employable as a litigator in Sweden. So arbitration became both an interest, and I firmly believed at that time, and I even continue to be a great believer in arbitration providing very useful tools for cross-border dispute resolution, as well as the other tools, mediation, neutral evaluations, etc.
Yeah. No, I think what's interesting is, again, as very relatable as the American who, is the black sheep of my personal family who only speaks one language. And so I can very much relate to that experience in some sense. And so I think what I'm curious to know is as you were looking to pursue some education, academic opportunities, was it always arbitration for you, or were there other things that you were looking at perhaps in trying to delve into while you were transitioning from being a U.S. litigator to perhaps this new career path that may not have been fully formed yet?
Yeah, well, let me go way back and say when I was studying at the University of Hawaii, I actually had a double degree. I had English. I love to read, and I had speech communications. So I was very interested, and I was in the debate team in high school and debate team in college, and so I had that as an interest. So going to law school was kind of like, what do I do after undergraduate? And someone suggested law school, and I had not planned for it. I did that. Today, people study the LSATs and prepare and all of that. I just applied to Washington State. A lot of people from Hawaii go there. My uncle lived there. Why not? And I figured I probably would end up leaving after the first semester and give it a try. But I found that I really enjoyed reading about the law. I enjoyed reading cases. I enjoyed having discussions with classmates. And I already, as a first-year student, started mooting. So together with another first-year student, we had to get special permission because they only allowed second and third years to moot. But we got permission to do it. And we worked really hard. And I'm very proud to say that she and I ended up in the final round with judges from the Pacific Northwest in the US, with two third-year guys arguing against us. And we were arguing a moot case, pretending it was at the US Supreme Court, that had to do with equal treatment of women students in the fictional case, wanting to study at a specialized technical high school only men could get into. So in arguing this constitutional and statutory arguments in the case, the two first-year students prevailed over the third-year males. And you know what the first thing that happened after that was?
What's that?
Won't believe this. So we were quite thrilled that we won. And then there was this was a big tradition, this moot court for the Pacific East states. And there was a tradition that you went to this private club where they would have a dinner. Then after the dinner, there was a big ball party where the wives were all invited, wearing fancy dresses and dancing. And so when we won, they said they were very sorry, but women were not allowed to come to the club where the dinner was. So they gave us some money to go to dinner at a restaurant nearby, the two of us, and then to meet at the party afterwards. And we were supposed to be the guests of honor, but we weren't allowed in.
The irony is so apparent. In for you, what was the attraction to mooting? I know you said you were involved in debate and you really kind of fell in love with the law in that first semester and first year. is it something that you continue to do? What was the attraction very early on for you? Is it just a marrying of really fun interests?
Yeah, it's just so interesting, you know, and then you think, well, about this and create, come up with arguments and test them, discuss them, then you realize, nah, that wasn't so good. Well, maybe we're onto something if we just twist it a bit, or well, maybe if we could just dig up a little more support, or how do we, you know, the devil's advocate on your shoulder, and then you kind of see if you can answer that. And if you don't find it in the facts, you look in the law, or you look for policy, or you look for, it was exciting, as exciting as doing a triathlon in a different way. Always different gears you can change, different strategies.
Is that something for you? Because I know personally, when I'm working on a case and a problem, talking about the problem with colleagues, talking about it with partners, and just even my wife, just getting as many perspectives and trying to tease out the ideas and the issues is such a productive tool in my tool belt. Is that something that you incorporate as well into your own analysis, it sounds like, or is it just the collaboration was sort of the fun part?
No, I think that if I was going to give, well, I guess I am now doing just that, one advice to all the mooties, and whether or not they're actually doing the Vis Moot, or if they're just interested potentially, and they're using those kinds of strategies in just their regular studies, that in real life you develop your arguments by reflecting upon what you're researching. And that helps you to drive further research, dig deeper, to come up and broader. And you have a lot of discussions. So I always warn the Vis teams that I'm advising or coaching to be careful about not just having dress rehearsal, particularly when you get into the orals. And just keep writing the same. If you're in the memo stage now, just keep writing on the same thing that you're rewriting. You need to have discussions that are going to cause your ideas that you're writing about to develop, or to question, to try to see new connections. And the best thing for developing your arguments is to have a discussion with somebody who pushes back and says, you know, I think that's too complex, or I think you missed this point, or where's the support, or that's whatever. You know, you're asking for legal change. Isn't it better to try to build a case on this? And then you have to defend your ideas. And sometimes when you're defending them, you learn to understand them better. You might find some problems that you didn't see in that before, and you might find ways to be able to address the problems and that reasoning. You might come up with something completely new. But in real cases, when the team is working on it, they bring the results of their research, the results of their reflection and their thinking, and they discuss and say, well, what about if we got a question on this? Or if the other side brings up this evidence, or they make this argument, how would we deal with it? Is that going to put us where we're going to be saying something contradictory that we just said before? Or is it going to put us on a track that's going to lead us to an end we don't want to get to? And that comes from discussions. And that's one of the challenges, by the way, of being a sole arbitrator, when you're trying to dissect what's been given to you to find out what's the best way to decide the case. You have to have those discussions in your own head. So all you students and these mooties, you know, use your colleagues, use your coaches, take advantage of the group think, because that's really makes a difference.
Yeah, no, these 2 points I think are ones that really resonate with me, and I completely agree with. I always notice the students' mastery of the material increases dramatically from the written portion to the oral portion, simply because they are forced to articulate it. And I know when I was in law school studying for the bar exam, studying just for my regular exams, I read somewhere that the idea of trying to teach something, you learn the material better than if you were just trying to learn it yourself. And so I was constantly just walking around my home trying to teach it to the fictitious student in my apartment, to my dog, to anyone that would listen, to just try and better learn the material. And I always joked with friends of just how if someone were looking in, they just think that I'm an absolute lunatic of a person for talking to myself for hours and hours on end about certain topics. In terms of the Vis as a whole, when did you first get connected to it, interested in it? What was your involvement? What was that nexus like for you?
Well, in 2003, I guess it started the International Commercial Arbitration Law Master Program. And before that, I had been teaching in the master program at Stockholm in European law moot court. And in that, so I've been coaching the teams in that and been teaching in the LLM program and the undergrad European Union law programs. And then when I started the arbitration master, then it was natural for me to want to have a moot team that was doing arbitration. So for a couple of years, I coached both the European law moot court and the Vis Moot. But I realized and taught in both that as in my specialty within European law was with procedural law, which at that time was not nearly as expansive as it is today. So this was some years ago. But I realized that it was difficult to really stay on top of both of these two areas. And so I decided that arbitration was the area that I found the most interesting. It was the most multicultural. It was, I preferred to study and work within that field. And so that's, so I put all my effort into the Vis Moot. But the Vis Moot for me was like natural when if you teach European law, then you're going to be in the European moot court. Teaching arbitration, you're going to go to the Vis. And of course it has, and should not be forgotten because it's a huge part of the Vis Moot, working with commercial law in a transnational cross-border context with the CISG, but even often you need to have other commercial law considerations because in the context of a CISG problem, you may have other issues that are lurking around there that may or may not come into play at the Vis, but in real life, things like Incoterms and statute of limitations and choice of law, damages, and all that come in anyway.
And so when you were coaching, what was your favorite and least favorite part about coaching the Vis team every year?
Oh, undoubtedly, my favorite part is having the opportunity to be able to work closely with with students who are working so hard and are really in a journey where they are discovering new capabilities and capacity that they have, and they're learning new things and seeing this dynamics of the group growing and learning together. I will say, I guess it's a Hawaii metaphor. I love surfing on the wave of my students' activity and their thinking and growth.
I love that. Yeah, I think I know for me that's one of the most rewarding parts is seeing the students just really recognize their own growth and their own excitement as they start to become more and more familiar with it. It's fun to feed off of their own energy. Do you have any least favorite things about the whole experience, just coaching in general?
I haven't, I've had pretty positive experiences. I think one of the things that a coach, so I'm not really answering your question. I'm acting like a politician. Don't answer the question.
That's okay. That's okay.
But in the Vis, you better answer the question you're asked with the short answer up front and then the explaining and the exception and elaborating. But I won't do that now. I try to set a tone that this is a learning journey and a learning activity, and this is something that we're all going to develop, not just knowledge, but skills which are going to be professional, useful skills and skills in working in a group project together. And try to ensure that it's a collaborative, because inevitably, especially with this long period of time, the different personalities, people have different priorities, they have different resources available in terms of their own skills, in terms of their time, their energy, etc. So there's going to be tense moments. And so it's really important at the beginning to try to create a real team spirit and also a willingness for people to be able to laugh and have some joy, to be able to realize that sometimes there's going to be some annoyance, that everyone should have some willingness to be able to accommodate and to forgive others when they, because you would want someone to do that to you. So that's one of the real challenges. So fortunately, we've not had a lot of imploding or bad situations, but I have heard about and have people share with me stories in some teams where they have some real discord or some real conflict between particular team members and such. And that's really unfortunate for everyone. So I think already at the very beginning, it's a really good professional skill. There's very few jobs, even if you're like a researcher in an academic environment, there are very few jobs that you're going to be working all by yourself. You have to work with colleagues, you have to work with bosses, you have to work with people who are trying to help you from the support staff. You have to work with clients who are not always so easy to work with. So learning to be able to adapt to working in a team and also being able to shoulder your own personal responsibility for your contributions. That is a challenge, and it can sometimes be frustrating for people within the group. But I think trying to set the tone at the beginning and going into it, knowing that we're all going to try to be our best selves, but we will not always be our best selves.
Yeah, I love that. I think it's the interwoven advice to coaches, but I also think it's something that each of the team members can take ownership of as well. Is like the experience, the stereotypical saying of you get out of it what you put into it is, I think, so true to the Vis experience, and it's very important for every student, I think, to continually to take ownership of their experience and their team's experience of it. And the teams that really embrace that, I always find at a minimum enjoy their experience so much more than other teams, and potentially to also do better because they're really enjoying it and they're really thriving in the debate of it all, the exchange of ideas as well. And so just pivoting just a little bit. So what was the transition for you into working with the Vis organization and less as a coach, and how did you get involved? What did that transition look like for you?
Well, start with the Vis organization, because that's a little bit different than the coach, side by side, but still. When Eric Bergsten, a dozen plus years ago, realized that as he was getting older and as the Vis was growing and growing every year, that he needed to move the Vis into something that would be sustainable and could manage this ever growing. I mean, he used to sit there and manually be and having his family members addressing envelopes to mail out to teams that were registering. He would manually be making the pleading schedule and this, who was going to respond to what brief and who was going to be the evaluators of the brief and such. So he realized that the Vis needed to move into a sustainable project. And again, as he was getting old, but he still was very involved. So he created the Vis Verein, it's an Austrian nonprofit organization to support the educational purposes of the Vis, because it is an educational competition and emphasis on education, not competition. And he set it up so that the three directors, Patricia, Chris, and Stefan, would then collectively, and then they could each have a portfolio of activities that they handle, and then they also worked together. And then Eric was the president of the Vis, and then he set up some members. So there were at that time 4 universities. Now there are 4. There was at that time Vienna University, because they host us, and then it was Pace University, where Eric had come from and had supported the website and such. And then it was Queen Mary, which has a commercial law center and a strong commercial as well as arbitration, and Stockholm for having a strong arbitration profile at the university and such. And now also Busarius, where Stefan is a professor. And then it was the Austrian Arbitration Association and VIAC, which cooperate with the Vis, of course, and UNCITRAL. And I don't think I forgot any member. Oh, and the Vis East and the MAA, the Vis Alumni Association. So we are the members of the Verein, and so that they're representatives. And so my colleague, who is a Africa in the Moot collaborator, Fabrizio Fortese, when I became president, which was when Eric retired from the role of president, and so then he became honorary president, then, as we know, passed away a few years ago. So I was asked to be the president and take that role. And so Fabrizio took the role of representing Stockholm University in the Verein at that time. So that's how it came. And so when people ask, well, what do you see as your mission as president? And I always have said, quite honestly, my ambition is not to disrupt a well-oiled machine. Stay out of the way. Everything has been, running so smoothly. We have the events similar every year, and we know where they're going to be booked unless something comes up. We'll be at the concert who's at the start, and we need to be at a bigger place for the prizes at the end and the announcement ceremony and such. Anyway, not to get in the way of the way things are going, but to collaborate with the directors, to collaborate with the Verein, and just keep the Vis on course in the way that, in the spirit of Eric Bergsten, in the spirit of the Vis Moot. And so the Vis Moot is in very good hands, whether I'm the president or someone else, because we have the directors and we have the organization behind it, and we have 33 years of tradition.
So outside of perhaps, as you said, not getting in the way of a well-oiled machine, I have to ask, and you can feel free to take the politician's route on this one, but do you have any aspirations, personal aspirations, that you'd love to see the Vis take into account in some capacity, whether it's long-term or short-term?
Well, I would like to see, I think everyone would like to see, but there are difficulties in this vision, that there was greater support for teams that don't have the resources, financial resources, to be able to afford to travel to the oral competition, that don't have the library and research resources, that don't have coaching resources, and that don't have, many of the teams that have been competing for many years have rich institutional, you could say, knowledge base and people they can draw on, and lawyers in their community that can help support and do trainings, and sending people, teams off to do pre-moots and such. And so so I would really like to see us grow the support for it. But one of the challenges in doing that is, as the organizers, we need to be careful that we are not supporting specific teams in the competition. So we welcome others supporting specific teams. We also need to be careful that we have excellent support, financial support from our sponsors. So arbitration institutes send us a contribution. It's not very large, because arbitration institutes operate usually nonprofit and they have limited budgets, so they can't make very large amounts. The law firms in Vienna, they hold a number of events, particularly for the arbitrators, And then there are others, firms that are also offering their offices for holding hearings and all of that. So we need to be careful that we don't somehow not show appreciation and respect what they're giving to the Vis, which because we couldn't operate without. So it's pretty tricky to say how the Vis could actually, as an organization, could somehow create a fund or a resource and then be deciding over how that could be distributed and how to determine what team needs what and who deserves it more. So that's something that I always try to encourage, that other organizations, for example, the Moot is committed to trying to provide access to information with an emphasis on Africa, but certainly you have, I guess, participants who can join your webinars who are outside of Africa if they would like, and arrange events. And so all of the MAA is doing a lot. Arbitral women contribute. So I think if I could leave a legacy, it would be perhaps to try to see if I can help brainstorm, not in my, for other organizations to create, or other individual firms and such, a resource that teams in need could apply for.
Yeah, no, I think that's it's an interesting, I think, I'll say tension problem that the community has. I will say that the international arbitration and the Vis community as a whole, although not perfect, I think one of the unbelievably amazing things and admirable things about it is it's such a tight community. It's a community that wants to uplift and support one another. And I think as an organization, African Moot, we've had such great success in just having the opportunity to collaborate and work together with other organizations in a lot of ways, even if it's just in partnering to put on a program like this or other types of programs. So I have to ask as well on the Vis Moot problem specifically. So not this year's problem. So historically, and I know that you said you're a procedure person, so I have a sense of where this may be going. But what specific types of issues I'm going to assume on the procedural side historically have been really interesting and fun for you to just look at and see how students and teams engage with it and come up with really interesting and creative solutions or creative arguments for?
Well, that's one of the beauties about arbitration, particularly international arbitration, is that there are so many different issues. It's kind of amazing that even though this community has been robust and around for some decades, that we still keep coming up with new issues. and there's different versions of them in different jurisdictions, different approaches to things. So do I have any favorite procedural issues? Many, I guess I would say. It's hard for me to identify particular ones. The issues that perhaps I find most exciting are the ones where it's difficult to actually find a way to argue it, that you can not end up getting yourself trapped into a position that you don't want to take when it comes to something related. So if you just had just that issue and it was just crystallized, then you could do that. But it's difficult when you're going to then have a second issue, or maybe the position you take on the procedural issue could end up causing you a problem on the merits issue. So those are kind of tricky, and then seeing how students can try to manage coming up with it. And of course, I like the issues where there's room to be very creative.
Yeah.
So, go ahead.
No, I was going to just say that I think it's one of the beautiful things about the Vis is seeing the two teammates at the oral rounds try and navigate that. And even in the pre-moot stages, try and workshop different ideas and different strategies on how to navigate some of these very interconnected issues. It's fun to see them try and work through it. And then also as a coach to try and troubleshoot and come up with ideas and see how they engage with the problem, I think it's always fun. And that there's often solutions to problems that I think most coaches and arbitrators sometimes haven't even foreseen and thought of that come up. And I think those are really, to the creativity point, really fun to see, because you're just like, wow, I didn't even consider this angle to this problem. And it's such a fun thing to see the students be commended for that creativity.
Yeah, one thing that I like to is fun of it for the success in the moot and for really equipping themselves for future practice. And that is when you can find on one side policy and principles, so that in any arbitration issue, you probably have some procedural efficiency, finality, party autonomy, practicality, issues that are coming in. They can be argued different ways. And so how do you actually take those and then elaborate them into an argument in the circumstances of the case? And so that you can end up oftentimes with this conflict between these issues. And sometimes you want to go to and take a very practical and say, well, we're talking about commercial parties here, and arbitration is supposed to be serving commercial parties. We see in court decisions, sometimes the court decision is very much, if you really study it carefully, the underlying rationale that it is based on commercial expectations. You can see that, for example, in English law, you can see it around the world in the different decisions. Or it can be based upon the idea of predictability, which has a commercial side. Or it can be based that they go to principles and saying, okay, we want to have the principle here and lift that up. Or it could be on taking a more strict approach to a rule. Okay, well, we have a rule in this instrument, whether it be arbitration rules or whether it's model law or if it's CISG, whatever it is, and say the rule is supposed to be this way. And so we cannot just bend it and interpret it. And we have to have some allegiance to the rule. So you're dealing with these different things, and then it can be a little conflicting. That on one hand, you're arguing for that, we need to look at what the commercial expectations of the parties are, blah, blah, blah. And then 5 minutes later, you're arguing about the importance of a black letter interpretation of the rule. So you have to learn how to try to make a cake out of whatever ingredients you happen to find in the case.
Yeah, I think that's very, very true. I think turning to a little bit of requests for advice, I'm going to call it. So you mentioned some, teams getting involved and starting to endeavor to participate in this. And I think every year there's new teams that it's their first time participating in it or one of their first few years. And so do you have any advice for students or for teams that are getting established into competing and participating in this amazing educational opportunity?
Well, I always say that ambition, dedication, industriousness, talents, all of that knows no national borders. It doesn't know if you have been doing something for a while or not. You have those characteristics that can. Opportunity does have borders. And so that makes it a struggle for those who are facing that they have barriers to access to get in. And so there are ways to try and deal with that. The MAA tries to put on a number of things that allow for those teams and those students who are new to this to be able to get some advice and tips. There are many of us who are coaches or former coaches who are more than happy to give some Zoom sessions two teams, or to have our teams do a meet online remotely to practice. We were doing that in Stockholm with teams from different parts of the world, from Iran, from the Middle East, different places, way before COVID, where we would arrange to have like maybe a little coaching session with the two different teams' coaches, and then our teams would have a little practice session together. So there are ways to get access to that information, but I would encourage every student who's out there not to feel limited by the fact that they're new to this and that they're not experienced, because my experience has both been in the classroom and with mooting, that those newcomers who are really interested and motivated and working and studying and learning about this, they very quickly start taking off. It might take them several weeks. It might even take them a few months, but they start taking off. And some of those in the classroom are a team who think, I've done this before. I know more. Well, I've practiced for, before or whatever. And so they think they know so much, so maybe they're a bit relaxed. And all of a sudden, the newcomer runs right past them.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I think too, it's with the Vis, it's such a unique experience holistically from start to finish, and there's so much room for growth that every student that I've seen, whether it's on my team or on other teams that have come in with that, that are fully throwing themselves at being comfortable in the uncomfortable, and being willing to learn and grow the most. And seeing that growth from the first day of interacting with them to the last day of the competition is just perhaps one of the most rewarding things as, a coach, someone who's trying to help see them succeed and see them grow. It is ever present, to say the least. In terms of, I have to ask as well, as the common law lawyers, at least on the screen, how would you recommend for common law lawyers getting their first, or student, their first foray into civil law concepts and civil law, what the civil law presents in the Vis? And I would say the inverse as well, for civil law lawyers or civil law students coming in and getting their first exposure to common law and the common law concepts. Do you have any recommendations for them?
Well, now I sound like a politician, at least in the US. Our similarities are much greater than our differences. And it's really true, because, and for one thing, when it comes to the civil law, you have to be a little careful, because the particularly if you're talking about some areas, let's say procedural law. If you look at the way procedural law is, the underlying principles, the historical basis, the way in which this procedure is set up with the courts and the litigants and things, it's very different in Italy than it is in Germany. You cannot say it's very different in Sweden than it is in France. So you can't just say, well, we're a civil law jurisdiction, so we have this.
Broad brushes for certain.
Yeah, and that's even historical. I mean, some have Napoleonic codes, some, are based on procedure on the Austrian code or whatever, have been influenced by German. So it's different. And certainly those civil law countries that are been influenced in, say, in Japan, in Korea, and China with German and other civil laws, that when they import it into their system, it also comes into a system that has certain expectations and cultural influence and different policies. So I think one shouldn't exaggerate that. And within the common law world, I mean, like, in Kenya, they probably are not exactly the same as they are in the Philippines, or they are in the US, or they are in Singapore. So I think one should be a little careful about saying that these two are different. But there are some approaches, and there's some that you can say is more civil law looking at the black letter of the law, but they have to interpret it and apply it too. And in the context of the Vis, we're talking about commercial situations. So my advice is you can be aware of it, you can see its influence, but be a little careful about making too strict and broad-brushed distinctions based just upon that.
Yeah. No, I think that's definitely right, and I think too it's as you said, it's the competition, at least for this in the international arbitration. It's that international word, right? That's so important. It's recognizing that there's not really one true dispositive answer to sometimes some of these questions, and you're pulling on different concepts to try and come up with a creative argument or a creative answer. And
yeah, what you're doing in the Vis, and when you're dealing with CISG, then you're dealing with instruments whose aim is to try to create a transnational, approach. And so perhaps the best argument is one which will, but then of course that becomes an argument, because how do you arrive at what is the harmonized, what is the international, what is, if there's more than one answer to the question, how can you deem that one is the one that fits that characterization?
Yeah.
There's room for argument.
Pivoting a little bit outside the context of the Vis as a whole, I wanted to ask, you have a very remarkable career, to say the least, and you're involved in a ton of different organizations and institutions, and you do a lot of work. And so how do you balance it all? Like, as a young practitioner, what's your advice for people trying to continue to pursue and have a very robust career, but also trying to balance those personal aspects of life and continuing to try and manage those schedules?
Well, I don't think I'm a role model because most of my career things have not been intentional or planned out, but different opportunities have appeared. And then I'll say, well, that's interesting, so I'll do that. But that's interesting. And then off I'm going on that. So today, many are more intentional, and they have short, the 1 year, the 5 year, the 10 year. When I get big, I want to be this. So I'm not sure that I'm in the best position, but I would say that it's really important to know yourself and to know what your resources, not your capabilities, because you have so many capabilities you're not even aware of because you haven't had the opportunity to tap into it. But to think, okay, what's important to my well-being? Is it important for you and a part of your life that you are interested in artistic things, making music, doing sporting things? If you are interested in different intellectual, playing chess or whatever, and if that's an important thing to you, that you ensure that you have time for those things. If spending time with your family is important, if you're in a situation where you have parents who rely upon you and need your assistance, or if you have other people in your community, if you have younger sisters and brothers or whatever, if you have a disabled or handicapped person in your family, or be aware of what are the realities in my resources. Do I have to work in order to pay for my tuition and to be able to go to school? Do I have a workload? Do I find maybe you have dyslexia, or maybe you have some migraine problem, or maybe you have diabetes? I don't know. There can be all kinds of things, which means that you need to take that into consideration as to what you can perform, when and how you can do it. You can be just as valuable in the workplace as anyone else, but you need to take into consideration your own needs. And it can be simple things. Some people need to sleep 8 hours. Other people pretty good on 4 or 5. So think about yourself and what's realistic, and then be prepared to devote yourself to the activities that you take on, and be sure that you find some joy in it. So don't do it with a doggedness and in a way that you burn yourself out and there's no joy. So the best Vis teams I've worked with, they've always found moments of joy. We had one some years ago. The team now is the lawyers have all gone on to become successful lawyers in law firms. But one of the guys, he introduced that whenever the going got really tight, that he would put on his telephone Rihanna's "Under My Umbrella," and the team would all get together and pretend that they were under. And so every time before they went into a pleading, in the oral pleadings, they had to stand outside the pleading room and go into a huddle in the corner and listen to "Under My Umbrella." We had another team that called themselves the Blue Smurfs, because we had one team going to Vis East that we called the Yellow Team, and one team that was going to Vienna called the Blue Team. The Swedish flag is blue and yellow. And so the Blue Team had little Smurf statues and gave them each an identity. And on their pleading table, they would have the little Smurf hiding behind their name tent that they were. And so they're just little kind of silly things, but it brought some joy, or than saying, now let's just go out and let's just go have some fun tonight, and let's cook the meal together and we can talk about the case while we're cooking. So try to find some joy in what you're doing, because if you don't find joy, when the going isn't fun anymore, you're going to have a really hard time to keep it up, and especially when you're balancing schoolwork and other obligations. And be realistic and true to yourself.
Yeah, I think that the two things that resonate with that hit very much at home for me is the finding the joy, of course, but also the what you said at the very beginning, which was, oh, that's interesting to me, I'll do that. That's interesting to me, I'll do that. And I think it's having that honest understanding of who you are and what really captures your attention and what really is attractive to you in terms of dedicating your time, because that's so precious. And I do also have to ask, because you mentioned something on like the little blue Smurfs and having fun, but I think something that's always so challenging in some of these types of competitions is for our students, and I think it's for any students, but losing that that original voice you have as a person, but also as whether it's a culture, whether it's, and how do you suggest teams and students just balance that coming into the competition, which there may be best practices, but there's not one set way in which to be successful in the competition or really in the international arbitration community in practice itself?
Yeah, already now in the writing stage, you should probably are already recognizing you have different writing styles, different voices. So you want to be professional. You have to be sure that you stylize, just like the clothes you wear or what you do with your hair. You stylize for the setting, whether you're going out to a rave party or you're going to a mooting event. So you need to stylize, but find your voice so that you're not just trying to mimic what you think like a law professor should sound like. Find your voice, but make sure that you put it into a professional mode and that you present your writing in a way which easily received by the reader. Remember, in the division of labor between writer and reader, the writer should be doing 90% of the work, not the reader. And that means that you have to rewrite a lot. So find that writing voice, but make it authentic to you, but stylized for the professional outlet. And then the same with the speaking. Don't try to present yourself like you think that a lawyer addressing the tribunal should be, but be your genuine self and smile. Something is funny, laugh. Be real. And it's much, much more effective. In real cases, the arbitrators like seeing people who actually look pleasant and look eager to be there and interested, like, wow, I'm ready to share the information I have with you because I want to help you, dear arbitrator, to decide this case. That kind of, instead of looking very serious and strict or whatever. And remember, everybody thinks it's amazing what the Vis Mooties have managed to accomplish. They, all the Vis Mooties, from the very best to the ones who are just beginning and learning. You're really respected, and everyone wants to see you do well. Everyone. So go in feeling like, okay, I'm here. This is what I'm going to do. And I'm going to be me. And I'm going to do the best I can do. And even if you're nervous, then remember, this is your 15 minutes of fame.
Yeah. So I have 3 last questions for you, and they're, I'll say, quick questions, but they are, I'll say, and this is at my pure heart of a traveler, Vienna recommendation questions for our students. Okay. And this is, and I hope you're a coffee drinker, because I'm, a coffee addict also at heart. So favorite coffee shop in Vienna, favorite restaurant, and then just sight to see for our students. Things that if you're going there, you have one trip to go to Vienna and you're seeing one tourist thing, one museum, one exhibit. What's that for you?
Oh, now that's a really difficult question.
I didn't say they were going to be easy, so.
I guess everybody wants to go to Central Cafe. I mean, it is nice, but it's a line to wait for. Back up to that, which has nice cakes and less a line. If it's nice weather, it's a really nice outdoor area, is Landsman, which is kind of close to the different mooting arenas. So that's a good second choice, but maybe first because there's less of a line. And restaurants. When you're in Vienna, it's not really my favorite, but when in Vienna, you should go to a really good Wiener Schnitzel place and try, or if you want to have the boiled beef, or if you want to have the soup. And there are a few of them. And I'm trying to think, I can't remember the name of the one that's Plaucher or something like that. Mm-hmm. I don't know if you know.
I don't know it off the top of my head and at all.
Yeah. If you find me in Vienna, I'll try to I'll write down the name and tell anyone who comes up and says, I heard you in Africa in the Moot, and I want to know. And I can tell you my favorite place what was the third to go?
Sight to see.
Well, I really recommend that if it's nice weather, that you don't know, especially at the end of March, but I really recommend, if you have some time off, to go by yourself if you're the kind of person who likes alone time, or go with your teammates. And maybe if it's nice weather, even have a picnic, or just go walk around in one of the beautiful parks. They have really nice parks, and you're indoors so much. So, and there's the parks that have like, what do you call it? Like the botanical indoor garden, and there's different parks and things. And on sunny days, you'll find them filled with people lying around, getting some sun, having a picnic. So that's my tip. There are plenty of museums and plenty of historical buildings that are really cool. But try a park, get some fresh air.
Thank you so much, Professor. Any last closing remarks from you? I really do appreciate all of the time that you've given us today.
You can see it's my joy. I appreciate it. I really do hope that any of you that are listening will come up and catch me at Euryticum or wherever you may see me. And if I have time, I'd be happy to treat you to a cup of coffee. And all of you who are coming to Vienna, you're all very welcome. So equal treatment to all. But let me say, I have a particular happiness to be supporting Africa in the Moot, because it's been an underrepresented area of the world. And it is one who's really embracing and growing arbitration. And the arbitration community needs all of you in Africa very much to be part of our community, and you can all contribute. And so I thank all of you, and even those of you who are listening outside of Africa, wherever that might be, everyone is needed and welcome, particularly the new generation, because this is going to become your community, and you will become the custodians of the arbitration world.
Thank you so much, Professor. I really appreciate all of your time. You've been extremely generous. I know that this program will be very insightful for many of our students and many students around the world who are participating in this Vis season. By way of a quick look ahead for Africa in the Moot, we have a number of programs coming up. So we have 2 programs this week that are scheduled, one with Professor Schwenzer and one with our colleagues over at SEAC. Later this week, we also will be having a program on December 5th coming up with Jus Mundi, as well, which is expected to be confirmed in probably the next couple of days. So please be on the lookout for those programs. If anyone is interested in outside of Africa and the Moot in joining us at our pre-moot in Nairobi, which is our 5th annual East Africa pre-moot, to be involved in some type of, whether it's a team or whether it is involved to sit as an arbitrator and be involved in our conferences, please reach out to us at Africa and the Moot. We would love to have you, and we can share that information with you directly. And then anybody who is interested and open in donating and supporting Africa and the Moot's work, there is a QR code on the next screen, which please feel free to scan that and reach out if you have any questions as well. But from here at Africa and the Moot, thank you so much, Professor Shaughnessy. Thank you at everyone at Arbitration Channel, and thank you all for joining us, and we will see you next time.
Thank you so much.